So yesterday legally was probably the most significant day of President Trump's administration and presidency. It was probably the darkest day of his tenure so far. In Alexandria, Virginia, you had his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, convicted of 8 financial crime charges. He's facing years in prison as a result of that conviction. He faces another trial next month in Washington, D.C. on other charges. Then in New York, you had his former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, directly implicate the president in campaign finance allegations and crimes, where Michael Cohen admitted in court that the president directed him to make payments to these 2 women who say they had sex with Donald Trump a decade earlier in violation of campaign finance statutes. This morning, he erupted in a series of tweets and he condemned Michael Cohen. He mocked the idea of Michael Cohen being a decent lawyer, and he said, if anybody's looking for a good lawyer, don't pick Michael Cohen, which was interesting. He also, and even more significantly, really rallied to the defense of Paul Manafort. He condemned the Department of Justice in quotes to suggest this was a 12-year-old tax prosecution that should have never been brought. He said he felt awful for Paul Manafort and his nice family, and that's really important because the public speculation has been that Paul Manafort, given the strength of evidence against him, must be angling for a pardon, and that was probably the only reason why he was holding out hope and going to trial instead of cooperating with Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. And so the president certainly seems to be planting the idea that he'd be open to a pardon and that he feels very sympathetically and warm towards Paul Manafort. So that's a big deal. It's a great question about whether Trump himself violated the law. That's not necessarily established directly in the court documents, and there's a little bit of a disconnect between what Cohen himself has said in terms of Trump's role versus what the government alleged in court documents. But it raises the question of whether the president directly conspired with Michael Cohen to violate campaign finance laws. What's important here is the government is treating these payments that were made to these 2 women as campaign contributions because they say the money was paid for the express purpose of influencing an election, which in that case means that those payments needed to have been reported. They were not. The real question will become whether you can compel his testimony in an ongoing criminal investigation, and that's a matter that would have to be litigated. And there's been discussion as to whether Special Counsel Mueller would try to subpoena the president to compel his testimony in that investigation. That's something that the president's lawyers have said they would take to the Supreme Court if that happens. That is unsettled law. The Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, has said in a couple of opinions that it does not believe that a sitting president while in office can be indicted. And we are told by lawyers for the president that Special Counsel Mueller's team intends to adhere to that guidance. It is not a binding law. It is the guidance of the Justice Department. We don't know that independently from Special Counsel Mueller. There is, however, zero bar against somebody, a president, being charged once they leave office, or even a president being charged while in office and that charge being held in abeyance until after he or she leaves the White House.